Building, Jason Falinski, Patrick Gorman joining me here in the studio. Gentlemen, thanks as ever for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, I'm also satisfied to be here.
Let's start with you, Jason Falinski.
Oh, no.
On Raheem Kassam. Should he be allowed into the country?
Yep.
Yep?
Yeah.
What's the difference between his case and Milo Yiannopoulos?
Well, I don't know much about either, to be honest, but I think in the case of this person, you know, you should be allowed to come to this country. You need to obey the laws while they're here. We enforce the laws that we have. I don't agree with what he said, but I'll fight for his right to say it.
Because when Milo was blocked from coming, it was soon after Christchurch, but he was talking about the attacks and said that's what happens when you essentially allow acceptance of what he called barbaric alien culture, talking about Islam.
Yeah.
And he was blocked for that reason.
Yeah.
So is it only timing? Because those comments aren't any worse, are they, than what we've heard from Kassam, who said that the Quran is evil.
Yeah.
So is it only timing?
Well, I think it's mostly only timing. But look, these decisions are made by independent people who have to assess it against a certain criteria. Look, I'm uncomfortable with what he says. I don't like what he says. But what I do know is allowing him to say it and hearing the other side of the story is healthy for our democracy and healthy for debate in Australia.
Patrick Gorman, Labor's saying block him. What precedent does that set? Where's that draw the line?
The first thing is the Minister does have the power to decide who comes to this country and the circumstances under which they come. So, of course, the Minister should have a look at this. I had, you know, a few days ago, had never heard of this bloke before.
Was Christina Keneally doing his PR?
Well, I think it's unavoidable by the time this conference comes in a week or so, and I note that Jason is not attending, and I give him full credit for not attending this conference, unlike some of his colleagues. But there's no doubt that by the time this bloke arrives and says whatever it is he's deciding to say, and I'm sure he's getting paid a healthy fee to say it, people in Australia will say, well, why didn't anyone raise concern about these kind of odd, inflammatory speeches before they happen?
But where what's the concrete case? Can you lay out briefly the concrete case for blocking him from coming to Australia?
What we've said is that the sort of comments that he has made and the purpose for which he is coming is to, look at, say things that I don't think many Australians at all would welcome. It is our country, and on these sort of questions, it's entirely reasonable that Labor asks the Minister to look as to whether he meets all of the tests required to get a visitor visa.
But what does that mean? So is it a comment that the Quran is inherently evil? Anyone that said that blocked from coming to the country?
The comments that I saw he made were about Nicola Sturgeon, and I thought they were particularly off. I don't know this person well. I don't spend a lot of time.
They were abhorrent. They were in 2016, and he deleted the tweet. I mean, again, anyone that sent out a tweet along those lines, which was just crass stuff. I mean, really.
And, I couldn't tell you. I have not gone and looked at his Twitter account and all of the things he said. I don't know.
But this is the one we keep getting highlighted.
Christina has had the time to look at his history of commentary. She is, our spokesperson in that area. I think it's a reasonable thing to ask the Minister. Takes responsibility.
But the comment about Nicola Sturgeon as completely off as I think we all agree it was, is that still a reason for banning someone from coming into the country?
Well, can I say, I think in politics and general public discourse in the Western world at the moment, there's too much playing the person and not arguing against the ideas. So I don't know, like Patrick, virtually anything about this guy, and until Christina stood up, I had no cause to know anything about him. The comments that I understand he's made are abhorrent, and we should disagree with them, and we should make it very clear where we stay as a pluralistic society. The difference between him and potentially Milo is that free speech has always been bounded by certain limits. For example, you can't defame someone's character and you can't incite people to violence or disorder. I think at the time, and I wasn't obviously in a position to make these decisions, and these decisions are made at arm's length, the view was that Milo was trying to incite disorder through his comments about Christchurch.
And that was, so timing again was the biggest issue there.
I think that was that's the line that you can't cross.
All right. Anything you disagree with there?
I think Jason makes some really good points, but also the
Can I
Minister...
get that in writing? That's
Gold star.
Thank you.
But the point is that the minister has access to more information than Jason.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
The minister has standards in terms of
All right.
how they exercise those powers. It's entirely reasonable the minister reviews the case and takes responsibility.
We'll see, because the government seemed to leave it open, so perhaps it'll still be a topic next time we talk. Let's talk about a couple of aspects of the union
When
bill.
is CPAC, by the way?
I believe it's August 9 to 11.
So, yeah, we will have a chance to talk
Late
about
next
it.
week.
Yeah, okay.
We'll see. So the union bill that's being put up at the moment, I just wanted to go through a couple of specific elements. One example being put up by Labor on the ensuring integrity bills around the nurses' union. This is one example, a theoretical. The nurses' union could take unprotected industrial action to protest unsafe staffing ratios in a hospital, and that could lead to deregistration.
No, that's not true.
Why not?
Because they can be ordered back to work by the Fair Work Commission, but that doesn't trip the integrity bill, where that is about militant recidivism that's on the basis
But
of what
this
you see
includes
with the
civil actions as well, isn't it? So couldn't that be used as a trigger and a court would have to decide?
No. Well, the Fair Work Commission or a court could decide on that particular issue. But in that instance where it's about work health and safety, that would not trigger the legislation, as I understand it.
And if it could, it shouldn't? Would you say that then?
Well, I think there needs to be nuance around that. I mean, you cannot have unsafe workplaces and obviously unions and their work...
the key element there is the unprotected industrial action, isn't it?
Yeah, but look, people take unprotected action all the time, and what happens is the Fair Work Commission orders them back to work. The issue would be if that is on an ongoing basis without basis for them doing so. I think if they
That's the debate, though, about
that's the debate. But one of the defences for unprotected action is there was a work health and safety issue at that particular work site.
All right, so I guess it would hang on whether there was or not. The specific question I have for you, Patrick, on these entitlement funds, so Labor says employer funds should be treated the same way in terms of this interest earned on these entitlement funds as company funds. But the company funds is using company money, and a union fund obviously is using union members' money. So isn't there a difference there?
Well, I think the initial argument that the government put around a number of these bills was they wanted to make the standards the same as they would be for corporations. Indeed, now what we've got is a standard that's only going to apply to funds where unions are involved in the management of that fund. It won't apply to funds where they are only managed by employer groups or by employers. It's just that the government's shifted their own goalposts in terms of saying, well, if you're going to have standards, let's apply them all equally.
The interesting part of this standard,
now it is just
so if you've got a fund,
but
if you've got a fund earning money and the company's had to come up with the cash, right? They get interest of that or earnings. They're entitled to use it because they're a company. It's just about making sure the pot of money is there. If it's a union fund, well, you don't want them to use the interest. You want that to stay in the fund and then members will have to pay less money. Isn't there a clear difference there?
The point Labor's made is that there are, and again, I've said last time, I am not the union fund expert in this building, and there's a fair few of them on the Labor side who can talk.
Who are they? I'll have to get one of them.
I think you're... Well, that's a good question. Who are they?
I'm sure they'll self-nominate.
If you're out there, tweet me. We'll get you.
Tom Connell, 1300. Talk now.
So, but do we need a better explanation of why, as I said, company...
I think your analogy isn't quite right. I think the better analogy is not company versus union. The better analogy is insurance company versus a union fund, because that's what they're doing. They're insuring workers' entitlements, and that would be something that would be regulated by APRA. And I think what we're trying to do in our particular piece of legislation is put them on an equivalency without over-regulating that particular union fund, because they're not a general insurer, for example. Right. So they will still have a lot fewer safeguards than a general insurance company or a life insurance company.
Any response to that?
Well, I guess the thing is that you're still going to have the situation under, if this legislation goes through, where the funds that are employer-run are under a different regime to those that would have union involvement, and that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. That's hard to justify publicly.
I wanted to get onto one more thing that's close to your heart, Patrick Gorman. Democracy reform.
Democracy reform.
You've got a few ideas. You want every student to visit Parliament. You reckon it won't cost all that much, even all the way from WA?
Why are we dragging every student? At what age are they? Do we make them come back, or do they have to sit a test at the end?
Arguably, there are children in the Parliament every day. But
None here, I want to specify.
not on Sky.
No,
Definitely
not on
children
Sky.
No, the issue is, and it's very different. You think about Jason's on the northern beaches of Sydney or New South Wales. His constituents can, if they are keen, drive. Their costs of access are far lower than the cost of access for a school in my electorate. I've been a member of Parliament for a year. I've not had one school from my electorate visit this building.
You're not taking that personally, obviously.
I'm not taking it personally. If it continues for a second year, I might. I think that...
Maybe
I'm a fan of Canberra.
Put afternoon tea on.
If one of them visits, I will.
Well, there you go. There you go.
So they get a free Scotch biscuit.
Promise to any
All schools in Perth.
And I'm sure Jason would do the same for any of the schools that visit.
I always do.
Indeed. The challenge is that Canberra and democracy are something that everyone should be able to access equally. I believe that it's really important that children not only visit, in their school in Parliament, but also the National War Memorial, National Museum, and some of the other things that are uniquely Australian, but also only here in Canberra.
And are they going to be impressed by question time?
Well, I actually believe it would improve the standards. I know that many of us will sit in Parliament and wave to the kids as they visit. It's a moment of joy. I know that if you have more young people, more future leaders in this building, that they will actually improve our standards.
I'm in trouble. We've got a hard out. You're going to get me.
Oh no! I was going to ask
Let's get Tom in trouble.
No. What of all the first speeches? What have been the highlights for you?
I have to...
Hard out.
Both of yours were the best. We do have a hard out. I'm going to have to leave now. When we come back, political editor David Spears will be joined by Minister for Water Resources...
Can we use that excuse?
David Littleproud. Stay with us.
So I can't answer that, Tom. It's a hard out.